At 2:47 a.m., somewhere off the coast of Somalia, 6 men in a small fishing skiff made the worst decision of their lives. They looked through the darkness at what they thought was an unarmed cargo ship. Easy prey, millions in ransom, a payday that could feed their families for years. They revved their outboard motors, loaded their AK-47s, and raced toward their target. What they didn't know, what they couldn't possibly have known in the pre-dawn darkness, was that they weren't approaching a defenseless merchant vessel. They were approaching the USS Nimitz, a 100,000-ton nuclear-powered aircraft carrier, armed with surface-to-air missiles, close-in weapon systems, and 5,000 sailors. This is the story of when Somali pirates tried to capture a U.S. aircraft carrier. Spoiler alert, it didn't go well. To understand how this happened, you need to understand Somalia in the late 2000s. After 2 decades of civil war, the Somali coast had become the most dangerous waterway in the world. No functional government, no coast guard, no law. Just thousands of desperate fishermen whose waters had been overfished by foreign trawlers, whose villages were starving, and who saw opportunity in the hundreds of cargo ships passing through the Gulf of Aden every single week. 20,000 ships per year transit these waters, carrying cars, oil, food, electronics, everything the global economy depends on, and they were undefended. Somali piracy exploded between 2008 and 2011. At its peak, pirates hijacked 49 ships in a single year, taking over 1,000 hostages and extracting more than $150 million in ransom. Their tactics were brutally simple. Fast skiffs, small fiberglass boats with powerful outboard motors, AK-47s, RPG-7 rocket launchers, scaling ladders. They'd approach under cover of darkness or in heavy seas, fire warning shots, climb aboard before the crew could lock down, take hostages, then negotiate ransoms that could reach $5 million per ship. The international community responded with naval task forces. Combined Task Force 151, a coalition of American, European, Chinese, and Arab warships patrolling the Gulf of Aden. The U.S. Navy alone deployed destroyers, frigates, even submarines to the region. But there was one problem with this strategy. The ocean is enormous, and pirate skiffs are fast, small, and nearly impossible to track, which meant that even with all that firepower, the pirates still controlled the initiative. They chose when to strike. They chose who to attack. And on this particular night, they chose wrong. April 2010, the Arabian Sea, approximately 120 nautical miles off the Somali coast. The USS Nimitz, a Nimitz-class aircraft carrier, was conducting routine flight operations as part of Carrier Strike Group 11. A Carrier Strike Group isn't just one ship, it's an entire naval task force. 2 guided missile cruisers, 3 destroyers, 1 nuclear attack submarine, a supply ship, and at the center, the carrier. Total firepower: Tomahawk cruise missiles, SM-2 surface-to-air missiles, Phalanx CIWS guns, torpedoes, and 64 combat aircraft. Combined crew over 7,500 personnel. At 2:30 a.m., flight ops had just concluded. FA-18 Super Hornets were being secured on the deck. Crew were rotating watch shifts. And 15 miles to the southwest, a white fiberglass skiff with 6 men aboard was heading northeast at 25 knots. In the Combat Information Center, the CIC, the carrier's nerve center, Petty Officer Sarah Kim was monitoring surface radar. Modern naval radar can track hundreds of targets simultaneously. Commercial shipping shows up as large, slow-moving blips with transponder identification. But this contact had no transponder. It was small, and it was heading directly toward the strike group. Kim flagged it to the watch officer. "Sir, surface contact bearing 215, range 14 miles, speed 25 knots. No AIS transponder. Possible skiff." In these waters, that meant one thing: pirates. But the watch officer wasn't worried. Pirate skiffs don't attack warships. They attack slow, unarmed merchant vessels. This was probably just fishermen, or a smuggling boat, or pirates who'd see the carrier, realize their mistake, and turn away. Except they didn't turn away.
At 2:42 a.m., the skiff crossed the 10-mile threshold. Standard protocol: issue a warning. The carrier's bridge-to-bridge radio crackled to life. "Unknown vessel bearing 215 degrees. This is U.S. Navy warship on your bow. You are approaching a United States naval vessel. Alter your course immediately. Over." No response. The skiff kept coming. 8 miles. 7 miles. 6 miles. The Combat Information Center elevated to general quarters, battle stations. Across the carrier, watertight doors sealed. Damage control teams manned their stations. The ship's defensive weapons systems came online. The carrier's captain, Commander David Thornton, arrived on the bridge. He looked at the radar plot, then at the thermal camera feed. 6 men in a 20-foot skiff, armed, racing toward a 1,092-foot-long aircraft carrier. "Are they serious?" someone muttered. Thornton keyed the radio again. This time, his voice was steel. "Approaching vessel, you're on a collision course with a United States warship. This is your final warning. Turn away immediately, or you will be fired upon." Still no response. 5 miles. The skiff was now close enough that lookouts with binoculars could see details. The men aboard were pointing, gesturing. One was loading an RPG-7 launcher. And then someone on the skiff fired a flare. Not a distress flare, an elimination flare. They were trying to light up what they thought was a cargo ship, to see where to board. And in that brief flickering light, the pirates finally saw what they were attacking. Not a boxy cargo ship, an aircraft carrier, with fighter jets on the deck, radar arrays spinning, gun systems tracking them. The skiff immediately cut power. In the CIC, radar showed the contact lose speed rapidly. Kim watched the screen. "Sir, they're stopping." "Are they surrendering?" asked the watch officer. "No, sir. I think they're panicking."
The legal aftermath. The pirates faced a complex legal problem. They had attempted an act of piracy against a U.S. military vessel in international waters. Under maritime law, that's a universal jurisdiction crime, meaning any nation can prosecute. But proving intent is complicated. They never boarded, never fired a shot, never successfully committed piracy. What they committed was attempted piracy, which carries different penalties. The U.S. decided to prosecute them under the Piracy Act of 1819, a law literally written to combat Barbary Coast pirates 2 centuries ago. The trial took place in federal court in Norfolk, Virginia. The evidence was overwhelming. Thermal footage, radar tracks, testimony from the VBSS team, the pirates' own confessions. In November 2010, all 6 were convicted. Sentences ranged from 20 to 30 years in federal prison. Abdi, the leader, received 30 years. At his sentencing, the judge asked if he had anything to say. Through an interpreter, he said, I have brought shame to my family. I wanted to feed my children. Instead, I will never see them again. I was a fool." The judge replied, "You were more than a fool. You were a pirate, and piracy carries consequences." The 6 men are currently serving their sentences in federal prisons across the United States. They will not be eligible for parole until 2030 at the earliest. And somewhere in Somalia, their families are still waiting for the money that was supposed to change everything. The attack on the USS Nimitz never became headline news. Why? Because it was, frankly, absurd. 6 men in a skiff versus a supercarrier isn't news, it's a punchline. But within naval intelligence circles, this incident became a critical case study because it revealed something important about Somali piracy. Desperation breeds recklessness. The pirates who attacked the Nimitz weren't suicidal, they weren't fanatics. They were desperately poor men who made a catastrophic identification error. The incident highlighted the need for better intelligence sharing, better coordination between naval forces and merchant shipping, and better economic development in Somalia itself. The international response intensified. Best management practices were distributed to all merchant vessels. Maintain speed above 18 knots. Use fire hoses as deterrents. Implement citadels, safe rooms where crews could lock themselves in. Private maritime security companies began placing armed guards aboard high-value ships, and the U.S. Navy changed its rules of engagement. After 2010, any skiff that approached within 500 meters of a U.S. warship without responding to warnings could be engaged with warning shots. Within 200 meters, lethal force authorized. The combined pressure worked. By 2015, Somali piracy had declined by over 90%. The last major hijacking occurred in 2017, the last attempted attack on a U.S. vessel, 2018. Today, the Gulf of Aden is once again one of the safest shipping lanes in the world. Not because piracy was eliminated, it wasn't. Poverty and instability remain, but because the risk-reward calculation changed. Attack a merchant ship, you might get millions in ransom. Attack a warship, you go to federal prison for 30 years. It's not a difficult choice. The story of the pirates who attacked an aircraft carrier sounds like dark comedy. 6 men in a skiff versus a 100,000-ton warship. It's absurd. It's almost laughable. But look deeper, and it's actually tragedy. Those 6 men weren't evil. They were desperate. They came from villages where the average person earns less than $2 a day, where fishing, their traditional livelihood, was destroyed by illegal foreign trawlers, where there's no government, no security, no future. So when someone offered them $10,000 to take a boat into international waters and hijack a ship, they said yes. Not because they were criminals by nature, but because they saw no other choice. And when they made one mistake, one identification error in the darkness, they lost everything. Their freedom, their families, their lives. And the USS Nimitz continued her deployment, conducted flight operations, projected power, completed her mission. She never even broke stride. There's a saying in the Navy, amateurs talk tactics, professionals talk logistics. But perhaps there's a third level. Wise people talk about the roots of conflict. Somali piracy wasn't defeated by firepower alone. It was defeated by a combination of military pressure, economic development, and local governance initiatives. By giving people alternatives to piracy. Today, former pirates work as fishermen, guides, even security personnel protecting the same shipping lanes they once terrorized. Not because they found religion or morality, but because they found something better than crime: opportunity. The story of the pirates who attacked an aircraft carrier is a story of consequences. About the absurdity of asymmetric warfare, about desperation, miscalculation, and the crushing weight of global power. But it's also a reminder that behind every pirate skiff, there's a human story. And sometimes the biggest victories come not from firing weapons, but from removing the reasons people pick them up in the first place.